Genial, entonces ahora damos nuevamente paso a Zachary Walker, que en esta oportunidad nos viene a hablar de algo súper novedoso e interesante siempre, que es cómo aplicar o cómo utilizar la tecnología para la inclusión y el aprendizaje de la generación Z. Así que un tema potente, interesante y vamos a escucharlo.
Zachary Walker, académico, autor y conferencista. En 2018, Zachary se unió al Instituto de Educación, Institute of Education, del University College London, como profesor asociado. Actualmente se desempeña en el Departamento de Psicología y Desarrollo Humano como líder del programa de programas de posgrado en Educación Especial y Liderazgo Inclusivo Internacional. Fue miembro del cuerpo docente en el Instituto Nacional de Educación en Singapur, desde 2013 hasta 2018. Recibió numerosos premios y reconocimientos. El trabajo actual de Zachary se centra en la neurociencia educativa, la tecnología móvil y el liderazgo. Ha ofrecido conferencias a líderes educativos y profesores de educación superior en América del Norte, América Central, Europa, África y Asia.
Hola. Gracias. That's it for Spanish. No more Spanish. I'm sorry. How are you? How are you? Good? Okay, good. Thank you so much. We can go to the first slide. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. Everybody, translations working? Translations okay? What? Okay, thank you for the chance to be here. I was here in November and got to meet many of the people in the room, and it was so nice. So I really am happy to be here. We're going to talk about inclusion, technology, and Generation Z, Generation Z. So we are going to talk about that a little bit this evening. Next slide, please. There are a few things that you have to know. Number one, you are going to have to participate. Okay? So look around you. Do you see anyone sitting by themselves? Look around you. See, make sure that they are included. That is inclusion. We pull them into our conversations, okay? You make sure no one is sitting by themselves. We must make sure they have someone to talk to. Okay? Yes? See? See. Okay. Number two, inclusion, technology, and the people. We're going to focus on those three things today. At the end, I'm going to ask you for some help. We're doing a research project, and I'm going to ask you for your help. Leda, you saw Leda present earlier. That's her. Yes? We're doing some research, and we would like your help. And then the last thing is we will have some time for some questions or discussion. Okay? So next slide, please. So what I would like us to start with, maybe, if we think about If we think about inclusion in society, what does that mean? I know that we have talked a little bit about it over the last couple of days, but if it doesn't work, it's okay, but I just need to know it's not going to work. 1 second. No, slides. It's just, there we go. So I want to start, when we think about inclusion, I want to start with Kareem. Kareem was a former student of mine, and I want to tell you a story about Kareem. Kareem is from Lebanon, and I was working in the U.S. at the time. I was working at a university, and Kareem came into my office the very first day of class, and he was with his mom. And they sat down, and he said, I'm starting college this year. He said, but it has been 2 years since secondary school. And so I have some medical issues. And so Kareem had been a very, very good student. Top of his student. He speaks 4 languages, had only gotten 2 B's in his entire life. Really, really smart. When he was in his last year of secondary school, he was at a Christmas party with his family. His cousin and he were driving home from the Christmas party, and they got hit by a drunk driver. Kareem suffered a traumatic brain injury. Does anyone know about traumatic brain injuries? So basically, Kareem had 3 things that happened to him. Number 1, he lost motor control. He couldn't really write. He could write, but it was very slow. Yeah? Number 2, he couldn't remember anything short term. So he could sit here and have a conversation with you for 5 minutes, walk over here, talk to you. He would completely forget who you were, much less the conversation. He could remember nothing short term. So he couldn't really write, and he had no short-term memory. And then the third thing, when he did walk or move, he looked fine, but if he did anything weird, you could see everything was just a little bit off, like physically. He just couldn't quite move correctly. So imagine starting school after 2 years away, because he had been in a coma, and then he had 6 months of rehabilitation, and then he's starting school with no short-term memory, not being able to write very well, and not really being able to move very well. So he came and he sat down from the desk, and I said, Kareem, how can I help you? And this was in 2008, 2007, 2008. And he said, well, I have this phone. He said, I have a phone and it will take pictures. He said, if I can take pictures of everything that's written on the board, then I don't have to write as fast. I said, okay. And he said, if you can help me video my way to all my classes, then I can remember them. And I don't have to ask everybody. And I won't feel embarrassed. And I said, okay. And he said, and if we can go into my phone and put all of my classes' tests and all of my assignments and all of my homework in my calendar, in my diary, then I can remember when things are due. I said, okay. So we did all that, and Kareem started school. Now, the reason I bring up Kareem, next slide please, is because Kareem had to think about, after that traumatic brain injury, what his life was going to look like. He could have very easily, and his parents could have said, well, that's it. You're going to have to stay at home, or you're not going to have opportunities, or you cannot go to university, or you cannot do lots of things. But Kareem said, no, I want to be a part of society. Next slide, please. So what I would like you to think about, and we did this exercise in my last talk, so I want you to do this again. And Laurie, if you can help with this. I want you to talk to each other. And I want you to think about, what is adulthood? And what are some adult things you have done today? Just today. What are the adult things that you have done today? Okay? 3 minutes. 3 minutos. Okay. So, we're not going to talk about it right now. And I've only got 2 or 3 slides that are repeats from the prior session. But I just want you to really think about what being an adult in society looks like. Because that's a really important thing if we're going to talk about inclusion as a whole, is understanding what that means. Next slide, please. So again, these are some of the things that we consider to be adult things, right? Employment, paying bills, relationships, health and exercise, being part of a community, maybe go to further education. Next slide, please. But again, I go back to this idea that this is about having choice. It's about having independence. It's about having autonomy, for you being able to control where and what you're going to do. And the question that I asked the last group when we were here, as some of you know, is, are we really preparing kids for that? Are we really preparing students for that responsibility? Next slide, please. And I think, again, we have to think about this requires a set of skills. Timetabling skills, organization skills, technology skills. There's all types of skills that are required if we're going to really be adults. Next slide, please. So, as we think about that, and we think about the attitudes towards disability, I'll tell you what, can we go back real quick? I want to show the video real quick. There was a video last time that didn't work. Does anyone remember that? It was very disappointing. But I think we can watch that video now. Now, what you're going to see in this video is, I think, you're going to see students with disabilities who have gone to university, and they're talking about their experience. So can we play the video up top? Will that work or no? They said it was going to work, so we'll see. If it doesn't, that's okay too.
Hi everyone, I'm a student here at Georgia Tech. We are asking students with intellectual disabilities around the country what's fun about going to college.
It's a chance to not be around your parents.
The best thing about being in college is the food. Being in a dorm, getting to meet new people.
You have a bed, you have a sink, you have a desk, you have a TV, you have a refrigerator. You can also hang up posters anywhere.
Great mocha latte, the best mocha latte I ever have.
There are more than 420,000 school-age students with intellectual disability, but only 2% of them are likely to attend college after high school.
I wanted to come to KU because of the classes, and I wanted to take choir. And also I took American Sign Language.
The classes I'm taking right now are Business Law 1, Intermediate Algebra, and English Composition 2.
It's cool to meet new people. It's fun to chat with the guys and the managers and the coaches.
I want to be more independent and to join the sorority as my mom did.
I like to hang out with friends, watch sports, and I joined the Southernmost Coral Restoration Club.
In high school, I have to be with a teacher all the time, so it was not like any dependent there. I was excited to have like a college life.
There are more than 300 inclusive post-secondary education programs around the country.
Having students with disabilities in classes has compelled our faculty to reflect on their practice. So it actually makes us better teachers, makes us better professors, makes us better scholars and researchers.
It's really got people to realize that we have to focus on universal access and doing things in universal design, everything that we do.
The great thing about including students with intellectual disabilities at KU is actually it makes the entire university a better university. It teaches students to appreciate difference, and it creates a more caring environment because students support each other.
This has united, I think, our campus faculty, staff, and students. They have the opportunity to network and get mentors and other social skills and career development that their peers have had for many years. Now they have.
I want to go into real estate in the future.
My goal is to be a teacher at a preschool.
I would know about run a bed and breakfast.
Political science is one of 3 career goals I have in mind.
My credo is maybe work in the Kansas state capital.
I would like to have my own food truck because I want to have pizza, have some burgers, maybe have some tacos, nachos.
College has changed me because it's helped me grow up, like getting a job or living on your own.
It's great, and you'll have a lot of support when you get here.
If I can do it, you can do it, you know?
It's a time to be serious. It's a time to learn. I have the skills. I have the skills to live on my own one day.
Think higher. Think college for students with intellectual disability. Think access, employment, equity, options, diversity, independence, confidence, friendship. College is possible for students with intellectual disability. Take the first step at thinkhighered.net, a project of Think College.
Again, if we're truly serious about inclusive societies, we have to think about what we're actually preparing our students for and what that might look like, right? If you look at attitudes towards people with disabilities, we know that 1/3, 33% of people think that disabled people are less productive. We know that almost 60% of people who have disabilities feel like they're not treated equally in their workplace if they get a job. We know that 1/3 of people who have disabilities report that they have been joked about, that people have laughed at them in society. Next slide, please. However, drama. Next slide, please. We also know the evidence is very, very, very clear that inclusion actually leads to much better outcomes, not just for individuals with disabilities, but for society as a whole. Next slide, please. So if you look at businesses, for example, we know that organizations with inclusive cultures are 2 times as likely to meet their financial goals. Twice as likely. We know that they're 3 times as likely to be high performing. They're 6 times as likely to be more innovative and agile. And they're 8 times as likely to meet their outcomes. This is not just about people with disabilities. This is about society. The more inclusive that we are, the better our outcomes are. The evidence is very clear. Next slide, please. You cannot see except for the bottom part. Retention. The other thing we know from the research, people with disabilities who get jobs stay in their jobs. They keep their jobs. They're some of the most dependable workers that we have. So again, all the metrics show that inclusive societies actually do much better. It's really clear. Next slide, please. Now, you recognize these people? I was here yesterday. Who would not want to hire those people? They're amazing. I would hire you in a minute, just like that. You're welcome. Who would not want them? Come here real quick, please. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. Come here, come here. Yeah, can we do a little for them? Amazing, right? Who would not want them to represent your company, to MC your event? Who would not want them to do that? Because they're incredible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next slide, please. And the thing that gives me hope, the thing that I'm optimistic about, is since COVID, we know that employment for those with disabilities has increased. And the reason is because we can now work from home. And that is the biggest barrier for some people with disabilities, is travel, right? Accessibility, getting to and from their workplace, getting to and off and on public transportation. But those individuals are now able to work from home. So everything that we're seeing, the purple, is people with disabilities, right? They're increasing their performance, they're increasing their ability to be in the workplace. And this is really, really, really good news. The other thing that we know is good news is if you look at this study over here, we know that companies that are allowing people to work from home are actually doing better performance. Their retention is higher, they're making more money, and their productivity is higher. So we've got more of our people with disabilities who want to work, and they're getting more jobs, and companies are actually saying, well, they should be able to work from home because we're getting better business outcomes if they do. Does that make sense to everyone? This is a really important point. It gives me a lot of hope. Because if we can tell those businesses, look, our people, they're going to stay with you. They can work from home. They can do the jobs. They can do everything that you want them to do. That's a really important message. Next slide, please. So 2 truths from the first part. Inclusion in the workplace is better for the employee, but it's also better for society as a whole, not just for the person with disability. It's better for the business, and it's better for society. We know this to be true. The data is very, very clear. Number 2, more people with disabilities are entering the workforce than ever. Both of those things are good news, yes? Yes? All right, good. Next slide, please. So the second thing I would like you to do, again, with a partner, I want you to list all the things you've done on your phone today. Whoa. What have you used your phone for today? 3 minutes. 3 minutos. Vamos, vamos. Is that right? Okay, so, Lottie, can you stand up real quick? You can stand right here, just the mic. Tell me, can anyone tell me one thing you did on your phone today? One thing you did on your phone today, anybody? What's that? What did you do? Yeah.
Micrófono.
Googled. All right, so we Googled, we searched. Yeah?
Buscaron, entraron a Google.
What else? GPS?
GPS.
Music?
¿Saben eso?
Music, música? Photos? Played games?
Bank transfers.
Paid bills? She paid bills? What else? Huh? What are you doing right now? What are you doing right now? Translations, right? Translations. And those are just 10 things. If we really listed everybody, we probably would have 30 or 40 or 50 different things we did just today on our phones, right? Next slide, please. Thank you, Lottie. So, next slide. When we think about technology in the society as a whole, this changed everything, right? The iPhone, June 29th, 2007. Next slide. 3 years later, the iPad. These literally changed everything for society, but also for who else? Our students, our kids, right? Next slide. This was said in 1993. Technology makes things easier for people without disabilities. For people with disabilities, technology makes things possible. This is a really important point because it's easy to look at all the things that technology is bad about, and it's easy to get caught up in some of that. Nobody in this room, nobody, if someone wheeled up with a wheelchair would say, no, 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 you can't bring your wheelchair in here, keep it outside. But we oftentimes have that attitude when it comes to technology. Oh, no, you shouldn't use that. You can't have access to that. But for many of our students, technology is the thing that makes everything else possible. And it's important to remember that. Let's look at technology use around the world, please. Next slide. So if we look all around the world, there are 8 billion people in the world. There are almost 5.65 billion unique mobile subscriptions. So that means people have their own mobile plan or cellular plan. 5.44 billion are using the internet, because some phones don't have internet still. And then 5 billion have unique social media, some type of social media. Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever, right? Next slide. If we look at growth, it continues to grow, right? These are the growth numbers for all of those areas. So everything continues to rise. Not only the population, but use. Next slide, please. If we look specifically at Paraguay, this is specifically for your home country. Yeah? Almost 7 million people, more cellular connections than people. Some of you have multiple phones. Naughty, naughty. 5.6 million people using the internet, only 4.2 million people using social media. Now, interestingly, look at this one. Social media is going down. And that's one of the things we know about this generation. They're less interested in using social media profiles. They're actually stepping away from it. Next slide, please. Time spent with media every day. Over almost 7 hours a day, we're on our phones. Social media itself is almost 2.5 hours a day, just on social media. Now again, this is not right nor wrong. It's just the reality of how we use our technology. Next slide, please. But I think this quote is very interesting. This is an age of expression heard frequently today. Never before in the history of humankind have so many and so frequent changes occurred. They have been occurring faster and faster until today humankind is almost bewildered in an effort to keep adjusted to these ever-increasing social changes. The rapidity of social change may be due to the increase in innovation, which in turn is made possible by the accumulative nature of technology. This was said over 100 years ago. In 1922. The point is that it has always felt like this. It has always felt like it's overwhelming. I could have 10 more quotes about technology that show that people are terrified of the change. In the 1930s, in one of the leading academic journals in the world, there's a quote that says, "The typewriter is going to kill us all." The typewriter. So again, this is all just part of change. Next slide, please. I love this quote by Thomas Friedman because I think this is really important for us as we think about how we're engaging with our students with disabilities. Your boss does not care what you know. The Google machine knows everything. Your boss cares what you can do with what you know. And this is very true, right? It's the skills, how you engage with the technology that matters. Are we teaching our students not just put the phone away, it's bad for you? Are we teaching them how to use it in the most productive ways for work, for society? Are we handing them a phone and say, play a game? Or are we handing them a phone and say, I want you to get me to my workplace using buses or public transport or Google Maps? And that becomes their game. Does that make sense? It's really important that we think about how we use technology and how we allow our students to use technology, because that might be the way that they get a job. That might be the way that they become part of society. Next slide, please. So again, if we go back to this, this is a real opportunity for us in the field that we're in to make sure that our kids are part of that trend. Teach them how to use technology and teach them how to use it in the most powerful ways possible. That might be social media, but it also might just be using artificial intelligence and AI. It could be any number of things, but because they can work from home, because now they can market themselves and do things online, the opportunities are like never before. We've got to make sure that we're preparing them for that. Next slide, please. So, who is society? When we talk about society and we talk about inclusion, what does that mean? Next slide. What I would like you to, next slide please. What I would like you to think about is, does anyone know the term Generation Z, Generation Z? Has anyone heard that before? Yes or no? Yes? Who says no? It's okay to say no. No? Everybody's yes? Hot dog, all right. Next slide, please. So these are the generations. If you were born before 1945, you're the silent generation. Then we have the baby boomers. Then we have Generation X. Then we have the millennials or Generation Y. Then we have Generation Z. And then this new generation is called the Alpha generation or Generation Alpha. Okay, everyone see those? Yes, we're good? Yeah, you know what you're in? Do not raise your hand. It's okay. All right. Next slide, please. Next slide. What I would like you to think about, Lori, please explain this if I need to. What is one thing that you know about the silent generation? What is one thing that you know about baby boomers? What is one thing you know about Generation X? One thing you know about millennials? You have 3 minutes. Discuss with your partners, what are some of the things that you hear in society or that you know about this generation or that group of people? Okay? Everybody good? 3 minutos. Vámonos. Okay. Okay. We are going to, let's just, very, very simple. What is one thing we know about baby boomers? One thing we know about baby boomers. Anybody? What's that? Hard workers. We've heard that about baby boomers. They're hard workers. Okay, good. What's one thing we know about Generation X? Generation X. What's that? I can't hear you, but I trust it was right. Good job. Very good. What do we know about Generation Z, Generation Z? They're the best. Okay. So it's important that we understand who society is. Because again, we're trying to prepare our kids, our students for this society. But what does that mean? Right? Next slide, please. If we look at Generation X, next slide. Next slide, please. We know that Generation X makes significantly more money than their counterparts. But, if you look at the bottom point, they are also in many cases supporting both their parents and their kids. So even though they're making a lot more money, it's being pulled two ways, unlike prior generations. Next slide, please. Boomers said we wanted it to be easier for their children, but they succeeded. When we interviewed Generation X, they tell us they don't want their kids, Generation Z, to end up like the entitled millennials. Are the millennials entitled? Ooh, drama. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Millennials. Millennials list humility as one of their most important traits. 50% say they look for humility and leadership, while in the US, more than half say this is important, which blows my mind given the US political situation. Next slide, please. So our current students are mostly Generation Z and Generation Alpha. But this is important because we oftentimes hear with Generation Z and Generation Alpha that they're broken, that they've got all these issues, that they don't work hard, that they're entitled. But let's think about Generation Z a little more clearly. Next slide, please. These are all the things that have happened since Generation Z was born. You've had 9/11. Top right-hand corner, you've had 2 recessions. You've had wars all over the world. You've had forest fires and global crisis with the environment. You've had COVID. Most recently, in the middle, you have Israel and Palestine. But you could also throw Ukraine and Russia in there. Now, that does not mean that this time in the world is any worse than any other time. But, next slide, please. It's in their face every day because of technology. Does that make sense to everyone? This is everything that happens in every minute of the day. So, 625 million videos on TikTok are watched every minute. 231 million emails are sent every minute. 6.3 million Google searches are done every minute. So we have all those events, and they're literally in people's pockets because they're seeing them, they're confronted with them every day. So again, when we think about technology, sometimes we think it's all bad stuff, but it can also be good stuff, but we have to teach our students, we have to teach ourselves to navigate the difference. Because here's another interesting fact. This is also, right now, the most peaceful time in the entire history of the world. There are less conflicts at this moment than there have ever been in the history of the world. We just hear about the conflicts that are happening a lot more. Make sense? So we have to really think about how we position technology in our lives. Next slide, please. If you look at how people find information, Generation Z and Generation Alpha, they don't go to the news, they don't go to newspapers, they don't go to CNN or BBC or any of the local stations. They go to TikTok. TikTok is how they find out what's going on in the world. Right? Next slide, please. However, we also know that this generation, they're the most racially diverse generation in history. So there's more diversity. They don't look at diversity as something to kind of be tolerant of or aware of. They're very interested in social justice. Diversity is the norm. It's not something separate. They just expect society to be diverse. Right? Next slide, please. 69% believe their parents are their number one role models. So if you're a parent, congratulations. You're a role model. They self-identify as compassionate, loyal, responsible, thoughtful. They're much more aware of mental health, obviously. I think we all can see that. They view their peers as competitive, spontaneous, adventuresome, curious, but they don't see themselves that way. Now why? Why would that be? Yeah, because on social media, they see all their friends doing all these amazing things. That's not real life, though. That's just the highlights of life. But they don't understand that, right? Next slide, please. They spend over 6 hours a day on their phone. They don't have a real positive outlook about the future. They're deeply concerned about the environment and what's happening in the environment around the world. They're generally more pragmatic, but this last slide's the most important one, this last point. But they demand purpose and accountability around inclusion. They're not just interested in talking about it. This generation more than any of the prior generations, say we will be diverse. And we will hold you accountable if you're not diverse. So again, what does that mean for us? That means if we're right and we're smart and we prepare students and we use technology in all the right ways, they're going to be raised with other kids who look at them and say they should be part of this. They should not be excluded. They need to be. Why isn't he hired just because he's in a wheelchair? Why isn't she hired just because her hearing's not quite as good? They expect those people to be part of their future. This is a really important point. Again, we've got tools and technology now that will allow our students opportunities like never before. And they're growing up with people who expect them to be part of the future. That's a real reason for optimism. But we have to do our jobs and prepare them for that. Next slide, please. This generation's entrepreneurial. Many of them want to work for themselves, right? And I love this. 40% of this generation plan to invent something that will change the world. I love that. How ambitious is that? That's amazing. 40% think I'm going to do something that's literally going to change the world. I love that. You go, girl. Do your thing. Next slide. How many of you know Tetris? What happens in Tetris? Tetris the game, yes? Things fall down from the top, and you're sitting at the bottom trying to make sure they get placed in the proper space. Yeah? That's traditionally how schools have worked. We drop information, and it's up for students to figure out where it's supposed to go and how it's supposed to fit together. This generation is more like Minecraft. What happens in Minecraft? You build the world from whatever you want. It's not just falling down from the top. You can grab something from this side. You can work with others. Tetris, you have to play by yourself. Minecraft, I can play with anybody. We still raise our kids in a Tetris world. But our kids are Minecraft kids. We really need to think about that again. When you're, as a parent, as a teacher, if you're in charge of a school, are you just saying, this is the information, figure it out? Or are you giving them the chance to make mistakes? Are you giving them the chance to work with others and figure it out together? Are you telling them that's right and that's wrong? Or are you saying to them, here's the scenario, figure out what you can do with that. Build the answer. It's a very different way of thinking, but that's the thinking we have to take on if we want to build inclusive societies. Because that's the world we're moving towards. Next slide, please. I think. Next slide, please. What I would like you to do, though, is again, to really think about your own practice, whether it's as a parent, whether it's as a teacher, whether it's as a school principal, a head teacher, whatever you might be. Because what this generation expects, if you look at the blue, they expect an inalienable right to participate. They expect to be involved, as they should. But we have to prepare them for that opportunity. Next slide, please. So, 4 truths. Inclusion leads to better income, better experiences for everyone, right? We talked about this. We know that. The data is very, very clear. Number 2, more people with disabilities are entering the workforce than ever before. Also very, very clear based on the data. Number 3, more technology is available than ever before. Very, very clear based on the data. Number 4, this generation of learners is quite amazing and they want to build a new, more inclusive world. Again, the data tells us very, very clearly those 4 things are true. So what are we going to do with that? What are you individually going to do with that? I said this to the last session. This is an important point. You can't expect everyone out there to start doing something. It has to start in this room. You have to build enough connections in this room to make this happen. That's what this Congress is about. It's about bringing you all together so you can prepare your students for that world. but you got to do it together. And we can't just say, oh, well, that's not how it works here. Or, oh, well, that's a lot of hard work. You've got to be brave, and you've got to go outside your comfort zone. Because that's what we ask our kids to do every day. So we have to do it as adults, right? Next slide, please. So before we close in just a second, I need your help. Can you help with me, please? Promise? Okay, I'm going to tell you about a study that we're doing. Lita's doing this as well. Next slide, please. We work at UCL, and UCL is among the top universities in the world. Number 8 in the world, right? Next slide. Now, we're in London. We're based in London. And you can see where we are here. We've got all these amazing things all around us. Next slide, please. And we work specifically, images take a little while to move on, don't they? Next slide. We work specifically at the Institute of Education. Next slide. Now, the Institute of Education has been ranked number 1 in the world for the last 11 years. Yeah, come on now, give me a little bit of love. Yeah? It's very impressive, mostly because of Lita, not because of me, and because of Lita. She's very good, right? But because of where we are in London, and because of our ranking, we get to do work all around the globe. And one of the projects that we have going on right now, next slide, is through our department. And in our department, next slide, we have a bunch of different centers. Oh, the bottom one, you can't really see it, is called the Center for Inclusive Education. So we have a full center that just focuses on inclusion. That's all we do, and we study things all around the world in inclusion. We also, and Lita mentioned this in her system, next slide, have a master's degree. I don't know what, it skipped a slide, but that's okay. That's okay, stay there. We also have a master's degree in special and inclusive education. And what we're doing right now is we're studying all kinds of things across Paraguay, but you get to help us start that study. What we're looking at is high leverage practices, culturally responsive practices, and inclusive practices in classrooms, okay? Next slide. So what we want to do is, and we're partnering with ION on this, we want to create this connected community, and we have a ministry that appears fairly supportive of inclusion. I mean, look at all the ministers that were here yesterday. That's a good sign. It's a start, right? You also have urban and rural settings. So what we want to do is explore what that looks like in practice. Next slide, please. What we're trying to understand is what is actually happening across Paraguay. Like, not what is said, but what is actually happening in classrooms. We're trying to understand what enables inclusion, but what are the barriers to inclusion? So what's making it easier and what's making it harder? And third, we're trying to understand how does policy impact all that? So the decisions that the government makes, does that help or does that hurt? If we can figure out these 3 things, then we can work on how teachers are prepared, so they're better prepared. And also we can work on policy. Next slide, please. To do that, we're working on 3 frameworks. Number 1, a reflection framework. Number 2, high leverage practices. And number 3, a self-efficacy I can't even say the word. Self-efficacy scale on culturally responsive teaching. Next slide. So those 3 instruments, I'm going to give you a survey in a second. I don't want you to take the survey now, but I would like you to take it, please. From there, then, we'll do some interviews. We'll contact some of you and see if we can interview you to really understand what's happening here and how can we help make it better. Okay? Next slide. So, if you could please either take a picture of the link or pull up the QR code. You don't have to complete the survey now because it's quite long. Okay? It's quite a long survey. But we're doing this study in Paraguay, South Africa, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, potentially China, potentially Uruguay, Saudi Arabia, and maybe New Zealand. So what we're trying to understand is around the world, what's happening, what is best practice, but what is also hurting practice. Because once we know that, then we can start sharing best practices. So you can learn from what's going on in New Zealand, and someone in Turkey can learn what's going well here. So if you get a chance and could fill that out at some point, that would be really helpful. What are you saying? I can't hear you. Yes, Fabio's on the team, but I don't like him, so I don't talk about him very much. All right? So again, we're trying to work through this so that we can all work together and understand what best practices are, yeah? Next slide, please. These are references. They're boring. Don't worry about them. Next slide, please. So if you could help do that survey at some point, that would be really helpful. We would really appreciate it. And also share it. Yes? Please share it. Yes, share it with teachers, share it with schools, share it with as many people as you can. Okay? Because then when we can go through and tease out data and figure out who shouldn't be involved, share it, share it, share it, share it, share it, please. Yes, and we'll send the link around as well. As we close, next slide. Remember Kareem? He graduated from university. It took him 6 years. It took him a little bit longer. But because we allowed him to use technology, we allowed him to take his phone into classes, we allowed him to be at the cutting edge of technology, he taught us so many things. He's now married. He's got a job. And he's a contributing member of society. That doesn't happen without technology. That doesn't happen without a mom who drops him in the office halfway around the world and says, you've got to figure it out. That doesn't happen without teachers who are willing to say, sure, you can try that. That's not what I wouldn't usually allow that to happen, but sure. But again, that's up to us. We've got to build that for students like Kareem. Because there are probably 10 Kareems in this room right now that can get out, that can get a job, that can create a great life for themselves. But we've got to make that happen, right? Last slide, please. I think it's the last slide. Aguje! All right, I think that's it. If there are any questions or comments or disagreements, that's okay. I'm happy to take for about 5 minutes. 5 minutes we can chat. Does anyone have anything that they would like to ask or say or share? Yes. My opinion about virtual reality. I think virtual reality can be really, really helpful in certain situations. Like all technology, I'm just careful about how we use it. I think you can use it to really prepare students. Where can you find it? Yeah. There are a couple of, I can share a website with you that has some really good technology on it. But again, some of it's just going through and trying it yourself first. And that takes time. It's hard. But yeah, I think any technology can be really, really good. But sometimes we also have to let our students figure out, say, I want you to bring me 5 virtual realities and tell me why you like them, and go through it with them. So that's part of it too. But yeah, great question. Really good question. Anybody else? Others? Oh, thank you. Gracias, gracias, gracias. Okay, I guess we're done. We're done, yeah? We done? Finished? Finished. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Zachary.
Thank you.
Nos vemos mañana para las 8 p.m. Que tengan una linda noche.